All right, welcome back to More Up North. So before we went to the break, we were talking to Senator Bill Wielechowski about House Bill 110, as it's been known now, introduced, of course, brought in by Sean Parnell, going through the House right now, and what it's really going to do to Alaska. And right now there's a whole outfit that's been hired, a whole bunch of people have boiled up to the top that we haven't seen in quite some time, who have decided that this is a really good idea. What exactly, and this slide that you had brought out shows part of what House Bill 110 would actually do to Alaska revenue.
Right. Let me just, be perfectly clear. I don't want to misinterpret anything. So the effective tax rate is today oil's at $110, $114, but I just picked 110. The tax rate today would be 32.5%. The governor's bill would drop it down to 20% for existing fields and drop it even further, roughly 12.5% for new fields.
So what does that mean in dollars to Alaska?
Well, let me just make one thing perfectly clear. The total take, because you have to include in this, there's a royalty of 12.5%, there's a corporate income tax of 9%, there's property taxes that are, probably a small percentage, then there's federal income tax. The total government take is in the high 50s, maybe 59 to 62%. That's roughly the total government take for a company doing business in Alaska.
So why do I keep hearing people say it's 90%, it's 95%? Why do they keep saying that then?
Right. Well, the important thing is what the effective tax rate is. The important thing is the money that's out of your pocket that's going to the government. That's the thing that matters, right? And when we talked before about tax rates in other countries, we're talking 90+%, 90 to 98%. Norway is actually a country that compares well to Alaska as a 78%. That's their effective tax rate. They take 78% of whatever you make.
So is effective basically like after you've made all your deductions what you actually pay?
Effective is what you pay, what's out of your pocket.
Okay.
If you make $1 million in Norway, you're paying out $780,000. You're paying out 78% of your tax to the country of Norway.
Okay.
And in the total government take for a company doing business in Alaska is roughly around 60%. So it's still much lower than what you're seeing in many of these other countries. And this is the effective tax rate for production tax is in the 30s or lower. So it's actually a dramatic drop. What would this do for the state of Alaska? This, in my opinion, would absolutely be devastating for the state of Alaska. The projections are that this would take out roughly $10 billion over 5 years, the first 5 years for the state of Alaska at current oil prices. Now, current oil prices, not at current oil prices, actually, that's at projected oil prices of between $85 and $95. If oil prices get higher, if oil goes to, say, $110, where it is today, and stays at that level or goes even higher, we're talking losses to the state of $15 to $20 billion. I mean, just catastrophic losses to the state. And so what's lost here? I mean, this is money that we will no longer be able to use. We will be in deficit spending if this bill passes. This year alone, we're at high oil prices. We are actually the governor presented a budget to us that actually puts us in deficit spending by about $300 million. If this bill were in play today, we would be in deficit spending of about $2 billion. Now remember I said we have $12 to $14 billion in savings. My projections are that within 10 years, our savings are completely gone.
And does that include the dividend?
No, we're not talking about the dividend. We're talking about the constitutional budget reserves, the statutory budget reserves. Our savings account is done. We are done within probably 7 to 10 years if this bill passes. We have no savings. And all you need to do is look at what happens in a state like Wisconsin when you have going to deficits. Who do they go after? They go after working families. They start, and Wisconsin, interestingly, got into its situation because they had big tax cuts for business, right? That's one of the reasons why. Now, in the state of Alaska, you have multi-billion-dollar deficits year on and year out after this bill passes. You will see massive cuts in education. You will see massive cuts to public safety. You will see massive cuts to collective bargaining. It's quite simple. I mean, you can't get around that. You'll probably see calls for an income tax. You'll probably see calls to raid the permanent fund. This will put us right back where we were. Just remember, before this bill passed, people were talking about an income tax and a sales tax and raiding the permanent fund. The thing that saved us from all those was ACES and higher oil prices and the fact that we are now getting our fair share. Devastating impacts if this bill passes.
So I hear a lot of, we don't need no federal government. I hear a lot of that. This governor doesn't seem to be real fond. He's going after Obama's, strangling us. We're going after the EPA. We've got Lisa Murkowski doing the same thing. We're going to have to take apart the pipeline. So Alaska depends hugely on federal dollars. We depend hugely on oil dollars. So where does all that, who's left to pay for it? Because I don't have that much money. You know, I don't know Alaskans that have enough.
They say Alaska's economy is a third oil, a third federal government, and a third everything else. And if you have a governor who wants to stop taking significant amounts of federal money, who wants to roll back oil taxes, billions of dollars, you're basically knocking out 2/3 of our statewide economy. So it will be tremendous. And here's the interesting thing about this bill. This bill, which gives back $2 billion to the wealthiest corporations in the history of the world, we've heard from BP and we've heard from some of the oil companies. We asked them, what do you think about this bill? And their response is, well, it's a good start. We'll probably need more later. So even though we're talking $10 billion out of our treasury, I would expect that when they come back, when we don't see significant increased production from this bill, they'll be back asking for more tax breaks. There's no doubt about that.
And don't think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you have a corporation, it doesn't work that much differently as just a person filing their taxes. You get to write off certain things.
Right.
So
yeah, the interesting thing about this bill is, do you know who the biggest beneficiary of this bill is? It's actually the federal government, because right now the way the tax structure is, the oil companies get to write off their state taxes from their federal taxes. So actually, the biggest beneficiary, the organization, the entity that will be making the most, by far, from the passage of this bill is the federal government. We'll be actually transferring huge amounts of wealth to along to the oil companies, but a huge chunk to the federal government. But let's go to the next one. Now, this is a really interesting slide here. This is on capital expenditures. You've all probably heard, well, capital expenditures are down. Capital expenditures are basically the expenses that are made on the North Slope to drill, to explore, to do seismic studies, basically to take oil from the ground, bring it up, and put it down taps. That's capital expenditures. And you've all probably heard how capital expenditures, we're just getting killed, right? There's no investment in Alaska. Look at this chart. This is not my chart. This is a chart from the Parnell administration. And the interesting thing is...
Has he seen this?
He can watch it on your show and see it right now. If you look at 2000...
Somebody call him. Tell him it's on the TV right now.
The line, there's a black line that goes in 2006. That's actually when PPT, the Petroleum Profits Tax, was enacted. ACES was enacted in 2007. And you'll see, since we passed ACES, there has been a steady increase upwards in capital expenditures on the North Slope. All-time high. 2010 is an all-time high. 2008 was an all-time high. 2009 was an all-time high. 2010 was an all-time high in the amount of money companies are spending on the North Slope. The interesting thing about this slide is, if you look over to the left, you're in 2001, 2002, 2003. You see a decline there. Guess what the tax rate was on the North Slope during that time? 0, or close to 0. Okay? So the argument that if you lower taxes, or investment will increase, it just didn't happen on the North Slope. We had 0 taxes on 15 out of the 19 fields on the North Slope, and investment declined. Let's go to the next one. Now, as you see, and these are the actual raw numbers, from 2007, you went from 3.6 billion to 2010, 4.6 billion. Go to the next slide. Now, this is the interesting thing, because you still hear companies saying, well, we're going to curtail investment. We're going to curtail investment. These projections are, every year, the oil companies have to tell the Department of Revenue what their projected investments are in the state of Alaska. We're the leaseholder. We ask them, how much do you plan to invest in the state? This is what they've told us. This is from the Department of Revenue, Governor Parnell's Department of Revenue. They still project to increase their investments in 2011. They still project to increase their investments in 2012.
So why isn't Jason Moore and Tony Knowles and Bill Sheffield and the rest of these yahoos showing these charts and talking about this?
And
I'm serious.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep seeing these people come out, and we're going to have a coalition, and we're going to tell people we're closed for business, and we've got to have this Sean Parnell's rollback.
Yeah. Does anybody know how many wells were drilled on the North Slope in 2010?
In 2010, how many wells?
Yeah.
How many?
You've probably heard there was 0, right? That's a big myth. There's 0, right? And I actually went with Senator House French to speak to a group of business professionals about ACES and whether we should roll it back or not. And we actually handed out little cards around the room and asked them the same question: how many wells were drilled in 2010? I think the average number that we got was 4. And I don't have a slide on this, I took it out, but in 2010 there were 152 wells drilled on the North Slope. That's actually as of November. We didn't even count the month of December because at the time we did the presentation we didn't have it. In 2009 it was 138, in 2008 it was 150. And by comparison, 2006, 0% tax rate, 146 wells. You had less wells drilled under the 0% tax rate than you have now today under ACES. Active rigs. You all hear, well, there's just no rigs working on the North Slope. Active rigs, 2010, an average of between 10 and 15 per month. 2005, 0 tax rate, 10 to 15 per month. So you're seeing investment. I mean, you're seeing it. You just have $1 million ad campaign that's telling you something different than what reality is.
Well, and frankly, I don't really blame them. Their job is to make as much money for their shareholders as they should. That's their charter. By law, that is their job.
Yeah.
And I think they should do everything they should. But Sean Parnell and the people that are in Juneau that have taken the same oath that you have, they have a little bit different charter.
Right. You know, the companies are just doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? They're supposed to be making as much profit as they can. But yeah, our job is I mean, a lot of times we are in alignment with the oil companies. This time, when it's a fight over how we split that pie, there is a big dispute. Obviously, they want a bigger chunk of the pie. There's trillions of dollars worth of wealth on the North Slope. They want to take as much of it as they can. And you know, as a legislature, as a governor, our job is to protect Alaska. We are the board of directors for the state of Alaska. It's our resource. We need to protect and get our fair share. Okay. So, you know, I want to talk about exploration because you've all heard probably that exploration is dead. Actually, Governor Parnell just issued a press release just yesterday or the day before or last week saying that exploration is dead in the state of Alaska. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, go to the next slide. Here's what his director of OMB, Office of Management and Budget, testified before the House Finance Committee January 19th, 2011. Quote, the good news is we are seeing a lot of increase in oil exploration. That's not my words.
Wasn't that the same day as he gave his big speech?
That was the same day the governor gave his State of the State speech saying that we needed to pass ACES to increase oil exploration, or roll back ACES. Okay, one other thing.
Well, we've got to run to a break.
Let's run to a break.
Let's run to a break. It's getting hot in here. It is. We'll be right back.